Hi friends, and welcome back into my studio. If you are new here, my name is Tammy Ernest and I am a longarm quilter. And here on my channel, I like to share customer finishes as well as my own personal projects. So a couple weeks ago, I had asked you to send in questions. I was going to do a Q&A, and so today's the day. And I've received a lot of questions about all different types of things, and so we'll get into it. I'm going to answer a couple here first, and then I already recorded some that were sent in a couple weeks ago, and I just haven't put those out on a video yet, so I will insert those after that, and then we'll move on to some customer quilts. So first of all, first question came in from Dana, and her question was, what do you use or recommend for marking on quilts? She says, I can do straight line quilting. Sometimes I need to mark those lines. I've tried chalk markers, Roxanne's Quilter's Choice. The water-soluble disappearing one makes me nervous. What do you use? Well, to be honest, I don't mark on my quilts because as a longarm quilter, I don't have a need to mark on my quilts because I'm not doing anything on my domestic machine. So what I did is I posed this question to my Quilt Circle membership and I received a lot of replies back. So Dana, and those of you who are wondering about this, I hope this helps. So some of the comments that were sent back said, I use blue painter's tape and then stitched right along the edge beside it. It works wonderfully and peels off very easily. That was a neat idea. I'd never thought of that. So just the blue painter's tape, making your straight line, and then stitching right beside that. Another one says, I only quilt small quilts, baby or lap size, and I use a Hera marker, H-E-R-A, or the Clover Chaco liner, C-H-A-C-O. Any of these products that I can find, I will link down below. But that was Janice's idea. And then others said, I have used the water-soluble marking pens, but always test them on my fabric before using them. I mark a scrap of each fabric used in my quilt and let it stay on the fabric for several days before I rinse it off. Also, I avoid letting the marks get hot, such as ironed or under the sewing machine light for an extended length of time, or in a hot car. I also use my mist sprayer to start removing the marks as soon as possible after I have stitched over them. On dark fabric, I will use a chalk pen. Lots of great ideas there. All right, and then Becky said, I use the water-soluble air and then have never had a problem. I wouldn't iron over them until they were off the quilt, meaning iron over the fabric, and not iron that section of the fabric until you've taken them off the quilt. I have also used Taylor's chalk. The friction pins sometimes ghost back. I would be careful using those. But then others said they've used friction pins. So some ideas there to hopefully help you out in your marking of quilt tops. And I think always the best advice is to try a sample block first. And some sample fabric, maybe just have, a piece of fabric and you use several different products and mark lines on it, leave it out for several days, try to clean it up afterwards, whether it's air, whether it's water, and see over time what you think and if you have any trouble. All right, received another question. It says, hi Tammy, I am a new subscriber from Canada, watching your videos regularly for quite some time. Love your quilting and the information you give on your channel. Thank you very much. And then she says, I purchased a Moxie XL last year and I'm getting to know my machine. I can't base the sides of the quilt top properly. It leaves the border wrinkly or stretchy. Do you have any tip for a smooth basting as we advance the quilt? Your quilt sides look nice and taut. Appreciate if you consider giving some tips. Okay, so a Moxie. Now, I am not as familiar with a Moxie if that is on a regular table or not, or if it matters. So I'm going to give you my suggestions based on a longarm machine that is on the table and not clamping the sides. I know some of those smaller machines, you're actually clamping them to a frame and then having to move that. I don't know if that would be different in handling borders or not. So I'm going to address this question as from a longarm where you are loading it onto bars and rotating it that way. My first suggestion is not in the long arming or the loading of it, but is actually attaching those borders to your quilt. I would be curious to see the quilt prior to it ever being put on the long arm to see if you can already see some of that waviness in the borders. So the way to prevent that is to attach your borders to your quilt correctly. The incorrect way to attach a border to a quilt is to have a huge long piece of material and you stitch it to the side of the quilt and then you cut it off when you get to the end. You're always going to end up with wonky borders if you do that. The best way to do it, follow the pattern. If you are using a pattern, follow the measurements that they give you for that quilt top. It's all math. It should all work. If you are creating something on your own, or maybe you've changed the pattern some, I've heard it suggest you measure the quilt across 3 different places and take an average of that or the smallest of that. But measure. Always measure and cut to that measurement, okay? Don't just add a border and then cut off the end when you get to the end. It's just not going to work that way. When I add borders to a quilt, I will always mark on my quilt top the middle and the 1/4 and the 3/4 parts of those. I will also mark that on my borders and I will match those points up. So a 4th way on my border, I match that up with a 4th way on that quilt edge. Halfway on my border, I match that pin up with a halfway down the edge of that quilt. And then the 3/4. And then I work in those sections. So I will pin the very end up to a 1/4. I'll pin in the middle of that one, and then in the middle of that one, and keep working myself down to smaller and smaller sections. The reason I'm doing that is if there's any discrepancy, either my border is a little bigger than my quilt top's a little bigger than my border, I am distributing that unevenness throughout the whole edge of that quilt top and not just pushing it to one end, if that makes sense. And then that if there's a little bit of fullness, I'm working it in, and it's not going to be as noticeable at the end and, where I have a whole bunch off the end. That's the way I always attach my borders. So I would begin by making sure your borders are attached correctly. I've also had the question brought up to me, does it matter whether the borders are pieced on the bias or pieced with a straight seam? And I thought this was an interesting question. They said they had heard on a different podcast that wonky borders can be caused by having that bias seam. So I've been trying to observe quilts as I've had them on the long arm to see, okay, just to notice, okay, this has a bias join or seam on the border. Is that making this border wonky? And I've had some that no, it's fine. Others that I've had a straight seam that have had wonky borders. So I haven't come to a good conclusion about that. My gut reaction is no. I think I think it would be minuscule. If I'm trying to be exactly precise and I always do the bias borders and I'm seeing that my borders are consistently coming out just a little too long, then that's at the point that I would change it. But I can't say across the board from all the quilts that I've seen, I can't say across the board that a bias seam in the border is causing a wonky border. I just have not seen that. So I would start with how the borders are attached to the quilt and see if that can make a difference in if there's any waviness on there. Now, I do have quilts that come across that either, a border is a little wonky, a border is a little wavy, or sometimes it's just a quilt that's a little wavy, okay? How do I work in that fullness and how do I baste down the sides? So a couple of suggestions. You can use best press, you can use some steam, use an iron to kind of, as you rotate that quilt and you're trying to get all of that, edge of that quilt up to the line that you've marked. I need my quilt to come out to this point on the batting, or that you can use best press, spray it, spritz it with some water, use a steam iron, whatever you can do to kind of shrink in that fullness a little bit so that it lays flat, and then you can baste that down. Another idea is to actually start basting from the belly bar and go up instead of starting at the top and then moving down. If you've got a lot of fullness in a border and you start basting from the top down, it's kind of pushing that fullness even farther down. That if you consistently through the whole section of the quilt start at the belly bar, and then any fullness you're easing in on the side within that section, and that can help some. But a lot, your fabrics will shrink up some. So I think, best press, again, test a small area of it, make sure it's not going to leave any marks. Water or steam that can help shrink up that fabric a little bit to get it to lay flat. Now, something I've been doing more recently is I used to have my tape measure like on this section of my machine, and I would have it attached to just like that little, it's a bar rest is what that is, but that's where I had my tape measure, my long tape measure attached to. And it was suggested to me to run it across the middle of the quilt top and to use down on that side bar right there that runs this way, that I have Velcro on the other side of it, and I have Velcro on my tape measure. So right now you might probably even can see the tape measure hanging down because it's not going across the quilt right now. So right now that edge of the tape measure is just, it's attached to the Velcro, and the rest of it is just on the floor. When I rotate my quilt and get the side, it's all taut and everything, then I will bring that tape measure back across and I will Velcro it to the other side. And I have already, when I've set my area of my space, I've already put like the little binder clips that you can get at the office supply. I've attached those to that tape measure where I want my quilt top to come to the edge of. So then I can, it's so much nicer because that tape measure is right there on the quilt, and I will use my vertical lock, and I will just start at that spot on that tape measure, and I will use the vertical lock, and I'll pull it right to the edge, along that batting, and I will pin those spots, move the tape measure out of the way, and then I'll baste the quilt top down to where those pins are at. It's helped my accuracy a whole lot more. It really has, in getting that side edge really straight, and I appreciate that that tip that I was given. So try those things out with your borders. Again, I'm giving the advice based on a long arm like mine. I'm just not familiar with all the different machines and whether the Moxie XL is one that you're actually on rollers like this or you're clamping it down. I don't know if that would make a difference. All right, Sylvia sent in a question. My next quilt features a jelly roll pattern with a large beige background area. For the backing, I am piecing together a predominantly black panel along with some dark blue colored fat quarters. My question is, what color thread and batting would you recommend for quilting so that a darker thread color from the back doesn't show through on the front? So you're going to use two different colored threads is what I'm assuming. You're going to use a beige on the top and a dark thread on the back. Not my favorite thing to do unless you really, really are good with your tension. And so just practice, make sure your tension is really good from one side to the other. In regard to batting, what color to use, or not what color, what kind of batting to use inside there, I would say a high quality batting. The reason I say that is because if you go with a cheaper batting and you look at it, they usually have splotchy areas, meaning that the batting was blown onto a surface and then pressed together to make a batting, instead of actually being laid across in sheets and then pressed together, needle punched together. So do a high quality batting. I would stick with a Quilter's Dream, or even I feel like Warm and Natural is a little thicker. So if you're worried about the color show through to the front, whether you're meaning the color of the black from underneath to show through the light fabrics, or whether it's just the thread color, but a high quality batting. Use a high quality batting. Don't go cheap if you want to make sure, because those splotchy areas and the other battings, then you're going to let more of the color show through that batting. In regard to thread color, I'm okay. I mean, you're saying you're using a panel on the back, so maybe you don't want to use a tan color thread or something. My tendency is always to match the thread color to the quilt top. So if I was doing that quilt top, I would probably do a beige or a dark tan in the top. And then doing maybe a tad bit darker on the back, but something that's similar tones. I'm okay with the quilting showing nicely on a black background. Now, if there's a panel on the back and you're wanting to see that picture and the quilting is going to distract from that, then I mean, you could go with a black, maybe a dark gray, and then maybe use a lighter gray on the top. But your thread color is going to show through if there's tension problems. That's really the time that you're going to get tension issues. It's just if some of that bottom thread is popping through or some of the top thread is popping down to the bottom. So just practice until you get your tension well enough that you feel good with a tan on the top and a black on the bottom. A thicker batting, maybe even going with just a touch higher loft, even if you stitch it pretty dense. If you go a little higher loft, you got a better chance of those tension issues being less because you've got a bigger section to try to meet there. So maybe some things to try. Maybe just try a quilt sandwich at first, just to kind of see what you like better. Hopefully that helps. I'm not sure. All right, then Barb wanted to know, I'm wondering what my preferred batting is. Okay, I don't know if I have a preferred batting because the more I work with more of them, I really like all of them. Now, that being said, years ago, I preferred Warm and Natural. My problem with Warm and Natural at that time was that they had a lot of what I'd say just junk in the batting. It was natural, but it was the natural junk. It was like the husks from the seeds and things. And I feel like that batting has been cleaned up. But at that time, I liked Warm and Natural. I liked the thickness of it, but I didn't like all the little black things that I was having in the quilt top because if I had a lighter, or in the batting, because if I had a lighter quilt top, then those colors were popping through. So at that time is when I switched to Quilter's Dream. I love Quilter's Dream. It's a nice, high quality batting. It's only sold in small stores and, quilt shops and Longarmers can buy it. I love the small family business that it is. I love supporting that. Whether I prefer cotton 80/20, I'm pretty traditional and I use cotton most of the time, but now that I've used 80/20, and I've also found that my section of the country, a lot of people use cotton, and the more I quilt for across the country, it's almost kind of regional, and I kind of see the shift changing to more towards 80/20. I'm seeing more and more and more requesting 80/20 and not so much the cotton. Now, recently I've been doing more quilts with wool as well. I was not real happy at first when I started using wool, but one of the quilts I'm going to show in today's video, I did quilt with the wool, and then I did the binding after I filmed the video, and I really enjoyed working with that quilt. The wool, I quilted it pretty dense. It's the Ascend pattern that I show later in this video, Janet's quilt. But I really liked the drape and the light feel to that quilt, even though it had wool is a little thicker, but it's lightweight. And I really enjoyed it. That's probably the first experience with wool that I really enjoyed, to be honest. But so that's kind of growing on me. And so my preferred, I just don't know if I have a preferred. It's like saying, which is your favorite kid? I don't know. I mean, each one has its purpose. Each one has, do I like it better in this or that? Kind of traditional quilts, if I'm doing, an antique quilt or something, I'll always use cotton. If it's more of a wall hanging or something, I tend to use 80/20 for those. But I'm kind of dabbling into that wool side of it too. Bamboo batting it's thin, but it's very soft, nice to work with. Once it's in your quilt, are you going to notice? Yeah. I don't know about that. I mean, it's fun to pet it and to feel it, but I don't know how much of a difference you're going to notice once it's in, unless it's the drape and those kind of things. I don't own any quilts that I've used bamboo in. So to see the difference in different quilts is a little different for me. I can quilt it and I've done that, but I don't always have those at home to know how it holds up and wears. So I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but or it's like a politically correct answer. How's that? I like them all. Anyway, let me move on to questions that I have recorded earlier. I did receive a request from Julie. She is in Melbourne, Australia. She is looking for a certain pattern. And let me explain this to you. She said 15 years ago she bought a kit called Confederate Squares. And she bought it in an Australian quilt store. And then she went back to school, back to work, and recently pulled that back out to get started on it, and discovered that she had all the fabrics, but she doesn't have the pattern. And she's asked at the local quilt store, local guild. She's not had much luck. She doesn't even know what the quilt looks like, she says, but she has all of the fabric for it. So Confederate Squares, she said, is a beautiful selection of Civil War reproduction fabrics. It included 21 fat 8s, a binding, 2 yards of a neutral. She says, as the name originates in the U.S., I wondered if some of your viewers would recognize it. I know this is a long shot, but you did encourage us to ask for help here. So, and so many of you watch. I mean, it is such, we'd love to help out. So if anybody knows a pattern called Confederate Squares Reproduction, 21 fat 8s, about 2 yards of a neutral fabric. If you can email me if you have any idea what that pattern looks like, or a place that perhaps Julie can find it, or we can get her some help in that way, we'd sure appreciate it. All right, Tara sent me a couple questions. She says, I am making a batik quilt for my mom's 80th birthday. She does not like anything heavy, so I've been thinking about backing and batting types. Number one, would the baby gauze-like fabric quilt up okay? Not sure I can find a color to match, but I'm thinking about that. So I have never been asked to quilt with the baby gauze. And so I actually did a search online, like, is this even possible? Because my first inclination is that is drapey and floppy and stretchy, and how is that going to work as a backing on a quilt? From what I did a quick research of, yes, people have longarm quilted it. They do suggest that you heavily starch it because it is such a stretchy. Now, a lot of people will use the baby gauze or the double gauze in piecing. They will piece a quilt top, and then others talked about using it as a backing as well. Some people hand quilt it, but specifically I'm thinking of it as a longarm quilter. That stretch is a lot, and my fear would be that it would drape underneath, you know, the weight of it would drape underneath, and you might not be happy with it. So a couple suggestions that I read online were make sure you pre-wash it, because there is a different shrink rate to that as to other cottons and things. It's going to shrink a lot. So just to try to get a lot of that out of there, and then also to heavily starch it. Think if you could heavily starch it to a point where it's not going to stretch when it's on the long arm, then it's a good option from what people are saying. So I have no experience with it at this point. It would kind of be a test run for me if I needed to do that. So I'm not sure. It's obviously a lightweight fabric, and it would just be dealing with that stretch and what is that going to look like in rolling it on the bars and in quilting it, you know, because on a long arm you've got your, well, I mean, even on a regular sewing machine, you've got those, the presser foot that's down, and you've got that on a long arm too, and you've got everything tightly compacted together. And what happens when you've got some drape or some stretchiness underneath it is it just pushes that along, and I would hate for that to happen. So it may be best to do that on a home sewing machine or something where you can drop the feed dogs. I don't know. I just don't know. I would have to do some testing on that, but there are people out there who have done it. And if I think about it, I will link a couple of blog articles that I did read about it. Some of them a little newer within the last couple years, others a little bit older than that, but maybe it'll be a help to you. So now her second question was, what about not using batting at all? On a long arm, I would say I never want to quilt without batting in there. A long arm machine is running at such a fast rate. And again, your tension issues are you're trying to get that top tension and that bottom tension to meet exactly in the middle of that quilt sandwich. If you have no batting in there, then you are talking a millimeter, I don't know, a couple millimeters. And with a machine that is running that fast and, you know, that many stitches over it, your chances of getting a good tension with no batting, where all you have is, especially if you're talking a lightweight quilt of batiks and then a gauze batting, or even if you have batiks on both sides, those are very thin material. And if you have no batting at all, then my chances of getting a good tension are minimal. And if you're doing it on a home sewing machine, I think you would have much better luck with no batting at all. But on a long arm, me personally, there are others that may do it, but me personally, I do not. I did one quilt where I had no batting in it, and it was a minky that had no batting in it. So I even had some thickness there, but I didn't like the experience. And even with minky, it gave me a little more thicker bullseye to hit, but I just did not like the experience of no batting in there. But so it may be something you can try on your home sewing machine, something that you can run a little something you can run a little slower, that you can make sure you're getting good tension on there. I just don't feel with a long arm that you're going to get a great tension having such a thin little bullseye that you're trying to hit. So just my 2 cents worth. There may be others that have different opinions about that. My daughter-in-law asked me to make a t-shirt quilt of all her concert tees. What type of interfacing or fusible web or other is best to stabilize? Yes, 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 please stabilize those. Again, you've got lots of stretch to it, kind of like the baby gauzes we're talking about. Jersey knits or cotton knits, they are very stretchy, and so you're going to find trouble even piecing them together if you don't stabilize. Personally, I like SF101 is the Pellon stabilizer. That's a fusible stabilizer. You can buy that by the yard from the Fat Quarter Shop. I also recently was introduced to Zomoneti, Zomoneti, I said C, Zomoneti. This is a lightweight fusible, I believe it's fusible. I think so. Lightweight, again, an interfacing. This one you can buy online at Amazon. I will link both down below. But others that have worked on t-shirt quilts have mentioned the Zomoneti. And this was somebody that makes at least one t-shirt quilt a week, and this is the stabilizer that she uses. But you do need to use some stabilizer. What I like, the Zomoneti and also the Zomoneti comes in 17 inches wide. The SF101 comes as 20 inches wide, which is perfect because you think of your quilt, your t-shirt backings, you know, some of them can be pretty big. What I would do is cut that off in squares. So, you know, a 20 inch or an 18 by 20 inch square of the SF101 or a 17 by 17 square of the Zomoneti. Cut those off in squares. Take your t-shirts apart in the underneath seams, or you know, at least take the, if you have enough, you want the entire front. Now sometimes if it's a smaller person, their t-shirts are a little smaller and you may have to go into the armholes. You may have to use this seam right here. So basically you want to cut the t-shirt enough that you've got room to do your however size that you're wanting. What I'm getting at is I would stabilize the entire back of that shirt and then cut it down to the size you want. Don't do it the other way around. Don't cut the shirt to your 12.5 by 12.5 and then try to stabilize it. You're going to get a lot of stretch there and you're not going to be happy with that. So if you can stabilize a 17 by 17 inch square, an 18 by 20 inch square, you know, just cut the shirt apart so you get the back of it off and you can lay the front of it or wherever the design is. The design may be on the back, it may be on the front, but you're cutting that t-shirt away that you can stabilize that entire design and then cut it to your 12.5 or 15.5, whatever size you're making for your quilts. So those are a couple ideas for stabilizer. Should I use a cotton or polyester thread? I think that's personal choice. I use Omni, which is a poly wrapped cotton. Is that what it is? Personal choice. I don't have a preference one way or the other, but either one is going to stitch up fine. It's not, I don't feel like it's like in the old days. I think both are great options. Both are going to hold up well. It's really your choice on that one. So, okay. Diane had asked me a couple questions. One, or the one I want to address, a couple of them. Okay, Diane asked me a couple questions. Diane mentioned to me that she had several smaller size quilts, so like 30 by 30, 40 by 40, that she was going to use the same backing fabric on all of them. And her idea was, she was asking me, did she need to cut down backings for each one of those, or could she just give me a wide backing and I quilt all 4 of them? And my explanation to her is yes, if you send me a wide backing that is wide enough and long enough that if you're doing 4, let's say 4 40 by 40 inch quilts, that I can load that wide backing on the machine and I can put the first 2 quilts on. I would prefer it to be the same pantograph if I'm doing this, because what I can do is I can load both quilts on side by side and I can do a pantograph over the entire thing. They don't have to be the same pantograph. I mean, I can do one here and then do one here. No, I really prefer, it would be faster. Let me just say it that way. It would be faster if I had one and then the other one beside it and I did the same pantograph. If not, then I can do one and then I would have to roll the quilt back and then do a second one there and then roll the quilt up. But the idea is you don't have to cut backing fabrics down to size for each one of those. If you're using the same backing on all of them, just send me a wide back that is large enough. Now it can't just be 80 by 80. That's not enough. So if it's 40 by 40, I need a couple inches in, a good 4 or 5 inches in between the 2 quilt tops if I've got 2 of them side by side, and I need 4 inches on either side, 4 inches on the top. Again, if I'm doing 2 below that, I need about 4 or 5 inches before I move on to the next ones, and then some at the end. So just make sure I've got plenty of room around that. But in loading that, I'm only loading one backing and then just adding the quilts on top, and it can go pretty fast. So yes, you can send me multiple small quilts with one large backing that I only have to load once, and then I can do all of those quilts. That's totally doable, totally doable. She also asked me about Judy Niemeyer quilts. She says, are you able to long arm quilt Judy Niemeyer quilts? She says, usually the idea is that a Judy Niemeyer quilt needs to be custom quilted. And yes, they will be absolutely beautiful if you custom quilt it, but it's expensive. I mean, long arming is expensive, and then custom quilting is even on more than that. So if you do not want to go the custom quilting route, yes, Judy Niemeyer quilts can be long arm quilted. And I'm excited. I think Diane's going to be sending me some to work on, so I'll be able to show you some. My idea in doing a Judy Niemeyer quilt, because if you're familiar, you have to look up some of her patterns, but a lot of times they have some sort of very intense medallion style center to them with some negative space around the outside edge. Because there are so many pieces to a Judy Niemeyer quilt, I really feel like if you want to keep all of that flat, and a lot of her quilts are going to be, the size of them may be more wall hangings. I mean, they're beautiful art type style quilts. I think a very dense pantograph is the way to go. And the reason I'm saying that is because with so many seams and so many intricate pieces and everything, if I do a more open pantograph, then those open spots, your seams and things that are all pieced right there are going to pop up a little bit. And then the parts that are stitched down are going to be more flat. So it kind of distorts the look of the Judy Niemeyer quilts because it's so intense in all of the color and the design of it that I think a dense pantograph over the top of it then keeps everything flat, makes it much more of an artwork that can be hung on a wall. And I would even, some of the quilts that we were like looking at, Diane and I were looking at, she was showing me some of the ones that she had. And I was picking out some pantographs that I liked that kind of mimicked what the center part looked like, but were pretty intense, okay? And this isn't an across the board type of advice, but I also feel like Judy Niemeyer quilts, they have a center and then they radiate out. So I don't feel like pantographs that have more of a wave kind of horizontal feel are the way to go. I think that kind of, not that it's bad, I just don't think it adds a lot to the quilt. I think something that's more, so if you've got a circle medallion in the middle, her stuff around the, the negative space around the outside, something that's intense that kind of mimics that circle, 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 or something more dense that kind of covers all of that area instead of being a large, open, flowy, wave type of thing or something like that. So I'm excited that those may be coming soon, and I'll get to try some of those and share those with you. But I think that's some questions that have come in recently that I have some answers for, and hopefully that will help you out in your quilting journey. So I hope those gives you some ideas and some answers to some of your questions. Feel free to always send me an email or a comment. Usually an email I see a little more often than the comments, but I always appreciate your comments here on YouTube as well. And I don't say this much, but if you'll like the video and subscribe to my channel, obviously you watch enough YouTube that you know that that really helps the creator. So if you're liking what you're seeing, then I would appreciate you doing that, because that helps other quilters find this channel also. So today, let's move on to some beautiful customer quilts. Melanie's quilt measures 59 by 75, and this is the Gateau pattern. This was in the May 2025 So Sampler box. This uses Corey Yoder's fabric line Abloom, and then it uses her cross-stitch panel. And I brought mine so that you could see what it looks like. So here are the cross-stitch blocks that are inside, that are set inside of the quilted pieced blocks. So this is what the panel looks like. You can still get this, and it has 16 cross-stitched. This would be like your stamped cross-stitch. So 16 cross-stitched squares. The colors are already there and the X's are already there. So you have two choices. You can leave it the way it is, or you can use thread, like DMC thread in these colors, maybe Aurifil thread in these colors, and you make the X. Now, if I was doing this, I would put it in a hoop just to make sure that all of your stitches are nice and uniform and your tension is good on your stitches. So I would put them in a hoop, and then you're just simply following the X's. You do X's in the different colors, and then you trim those up to the size that you need to set them into the quilt pattern. Now, another thing that I would tell you when you're doing this is to always make your X's, your final X, go in the same direction. So if you do the first half of your X from top left to bottom right, then always make your second part of the X from the top right to the bottom down, or to the bottom left. And do that on every stitch. It makes your stitching, your cross stitching, look so much better. If you've got some that are, the top X is going from the top left to the bottom right, and others you have going from the top right to the bottom left, it looks more like child's work. Okay, I'm just going to say that. It looks more like child's work, but if you continue, you keep it consistent, that your top stitch is always in the same direction, it's going to look much, much nicer. So here are all the different patterns that are on there. Great car work if you're doing it, great TV time car work, and then this panel is still available. Then it also used the Jolly Bar by Corey Yoder in her Abloom line, and then you needed 2.5 yards of background fabric, also for the border, and then you needed a binding. And it also has a backing fabric that I will show you in just a second. If you received this pattern in the Sew Sampler box, then there are still finishing kits on the Fat Quarter Shop website if you want to do it the way that is mentioned on the back of the pattern. That does include, that includes a dark binding in this darker gray color, or the brownish gray color. That is not that exact print. It's a different print, but it's that color is the binding color, and then it includes your background fabric also. So if you want the finishing kit, that would include your background and your binding, from what I understand. And then there is a backing kit as well, and it is this fabric line right here. This is part of the Abloom line. Very pretty. Just a very pretty fabric. The melons and the orangey kind of colors, a lot of open white space. The greens are a very pretty green, so a very pretty backing fabric. So that is also available on the Fat Quarter Shop website. Now that does, I believe, come in a wide backing. And I'm not sure if the backing set that is on the Fat Quarter Shop is the wide backing, or if it's yardage that you then have to piece. Either way, it's not a hard thing to do. So a jolly bar, I mentioned that. This pattern does use a jolly bar, and that's what you're seeing. Now it looks like to me that those are, a jolly bar is what came in the Sew Sampler box. And so always when you get a pre-cut, they're giving you a pattern to use along with that. But let me look at the measurements. Yeah, you are cutting them into 2.5-inch squares, or into 2.5-inch strips. So if you have a jolly, or if you have a jelly roll of this fabric line or whatever fabric line, that would work also, because it's 2.5-inch strips or squares in all of this. So that's a good option also. But the Gateau pattern. Now these are not available outside of the Sew Sampler box. This was part of the Sew Sampler box. So this does not come as a separate pattern. You have to get the Sew Sampler box if you want those patterns. So a great way to use this panel, this cross stitch panel. Very, very cute. So you can see the whole Abloom line, the mint greens and the oranges and the browns. You've got some lighter tan colors. You have some darker of the brownish gray colors. And then those blocks are set inside. The background fabric here is a tone on tone. It has a little bit of a white floral print to it. And then you're seeing each one of these cross-stitched squares is set inside of a larger block. That larger block consists of 2 strips on either side, a 4-patch on each corner, and then those blocks are joined with sashing. And the sashing is a 2.5-inch strip of the background print with cornerstones also. Now what Melanie did, the pattern finished after this border right here, the white border. Melanie went ahead and added a second border around, so I like that. Her quilt measures a little larger than the pattern does then. The pattern measures 53 by 70, and then hers measures 58 by 75. So she has added the whole, I like that. I like the finishing touch around there. Bringing that orange. This has got a melon background, where this has the white background. This has a little more of the peachy melon color background, but it's the exact same print as is on the back. All right, so for the pantograph, I went with something new. This is a new pantograph to me. I believe this was, this is from My Creative Stitches, and I believe one day they were having I think they do a $6 sale, just like a pantograph that you can get that's on sale that day. And I like the looks of this one, so I purchased it for $6, or I'm pretty sure that's what it was, $6. A normal pantograph costs about $15 is what the normal price is. $12 for some, usually $15. So when you find them in a deal and you like, even if I don't know what I'm going to use it for, something always comes up. So this is what the pantograph looks like. So you have some spirals, but they're kind of interesting the way those spirals have the little circle dot or bubble at the end of them. The spirals are kind of tight. You notice as they're actually overstitching on some lines, but then when it comes into the inside of the spiral, it opens up. So that was a really cute design. And then you have the paisleys that are like 3 paisleys together, almost like a floral type design. This is called Callista, I guess is how you would pronounce it. Callista feathers. kind of dainty. I just thought it was a cute, cute pantograph. And so when Melanie said I could choose for her what pantograph to use, I decided to use this one. And here is what it looks like. Did use Omni Natural White thread. Let me just bring it in. Try to get it straightened out here. And that is what it looks like on the quilt. I liked it. I think it's just a very dainty, kind of soft, floral, but just different than what I've used on any others. I really liked it. So this is Omni Natural White thread that you see. No fussy points on this one. When I was realigning, when I would rotate my quilt and then realign, the place that I was realigning to, there is just a point right here. Do you see how it kind of comes up and goes around? Otherwise, everything's pretty circular. So when I realign a pantograph, I'm always looking for a specific intersection, a specific point that I can hover my needle over and then use the drop and drag feature. So that way my computer thinks I'm always at that spot until I drop it. So what I do is I hover my needle over that spot. I'm always looking for some sort of a specific point, an intersection. And I like that just little, at the top of that little hill, it was an exact point. So I hover my needle over that area. I hit the drag feature. My computer thinks my needle is always at that spot, no matter where I move my machine to. I rotate my quilt then, so I've got new area, but I always, when I rotate it, that spot, I want to leave low enough underneath my bars that I can realign to that point. So once I get everything straightened out on my bars again, the sides basted down, everything nice and neat, then I will hover my machine back over that exact same point. Sometimes I mark it with a pen if I feel like I'm going to forget which one it is along that whole quilt line, because this motif is repeated all the way down the quilt. So I will hover my needle over that exact spot and then I'll hit drop. And now my computer says, okay, now you take over. You know, it's kind of like I've held your hand for all this time and now I can let go. My computer now says, okay, I'll let go. And now when I move my computer, it's moving, those crosshairs are exactly where I am on the quilt top. So that's how I rotate a quilt. But I'm always looking for a specific point. On this one, there weren't as many because you got lots of round circles and spirals and things. So I was looking for an exact point that I could use. So that is what the Callista feathers looks like. And such a cute quilt. Janet's quilt is the pattern called Ascend. This is done by Tia Quilt Works, and I have linked this pattern down below. So anytime I mention a pattern or fabrics, always go underneath my video and there should be a little button that says more. First you should see like my website and that kind of thing, but if there's a little wording that says more, when you click on that, it drops down a whole bunch more of other information. And this is Janet's quilt, so underneath that information it'll say Janet's quilt, and then I list the pattern, the fabric, the pantograph, the batting, the thread, everything that I mentioned about the quilt is listed down there below. There are links there so that if you want to purchase those things or go see them for yourself, you can go to those links. Some of them are affiliate links, which just means I get a small amount of money if you purchase something through that link, but it's obviously not necessary. Others are not, like this pattern is not an affiliate link. It just takes you straight to that Tia Quilt Works so that you can buy the pattern for yourself. So always check that out underneath the video. So Janet has used all Kaffe Fassett fabric line. She says it's from several different of his collections. Very bright, very fun, lots of teals and purples and oranges. We have everything from fish to flowers to circles, and it's just a very fun print. This very much reminds me of like a Bargello type of quilt, but not as small of fabric. pieces, so much larger. What you need to create this quilt is 8 half-yard cuts of fabric. So down below I did list a half-yard bundle fabric bundle of Kaffe Fassett. It does include 24 half-yard bundles, so that means you can make 3 quilts. So 3 grandchildren, I think that's what Janet is making. This is for a granddaughter, or 3 grandchildren, or 1 for you and 1 for 2 friends. You know, you can make 3 of them. So the finishes, now the pattern says it finishes at 67 by 79. Janet's finishes at 60 by 70 because she did not add the border around the edge. So if you can see the pattern itself, there is a whole border. That is another yard of fabric that you would need. Now it looks beautiful without it. Janet made hers without a border around the outside edge. As you can see, just finishes with that last square there. But notice the design. It's like a wave pattern, or going up and down across the quilt. The reason you need the half yard is because this is all the same print as it's going up the quilt and down, and then it finishes all the way up at the top. They're larger pieces. They look about like 5 by 10 inch pieces is what I'm guessing they are. So I'm sure it goes together quickly. It would be put together. I don't have the pattern. I just have the front and back of the pattern. But it looks like to me that it would go together in long columns is how you are creating that, because you've got blocks that are coming together. The intersection of the piecing of these 2 blocks is in the center of this block here. So if we do that by columns, then that's how we're getting that effect. Very pretty. The backing fabric is also a Kaffe Fassett design. Isn't that pretty? The bright oranges and greens and all of that. So the thread on this one, Janet just said pick something that matches the quilt top. Now, a lot of times I would use a gray on there, but knowing this is done for a couple reasons. Knowing it's done for a granddaughter, I felt comfortable adding some color on this one. And also just because the fabrics are so bright and so bold, then I felt adding color on this one is just the right thing to do. Instead of doing gray or cream, just was not going to match at all. So doing some color. So this is what I chose. I chose an Omni thread. This is number 3114. I believe this is called lilac, frosted lilac. Anyway, I will link it down below, whatever it is exactly. So that is the color. You really, it kind of almost reads as a cream on here. You really have to get in close to even see that it's purple. But you can see with some of those fabrics, especially in this section of the quilt, there are a lot of teals and blues and purples. So that's what I used. I also have some pre-wound bobbins that are in the purple. Let me grab one so you can see it. So I purchased these recently. I do purchase my pre-wound bobbins from Dash. I do believe you have to have a wholesale account for them, but you can get these on your favorite quilting store. They usually have Linda's Electric Quilts. A lot of times they'll have a good selection of the Filtech bobbins. These are the Magna Glide pre-wound bobbins done by Filtech, and I buy them through Dash. So if you happen to own a business and are doing this for work, then you could get a wholesale account through them. But this is the purple in the pre-wound bobbins, and I was so happy I did this because I really like the lighter thread in the bobbin. I feel like that really blends into the quilt better. This Omni thread is a little thicker, and this is a 40 weight. I believe these bobbins are either a 50 or 60 weight. Sometimes there's a little bit of a difference between the colored ones. There's Magna Glide and there's Magna Delight. And I can't remember which one of these this is. It may be the Magna Glide because I purchased a whole box of them. If it's the Magna Delight, a lot of times they only come in the little containers that are like 10. And I think those are 60 weight. I believe these, I may get it wrong. And I think I did this on a recent video too. I had it all backwards. I should memorize this stuff, you know. But this is a 40 weight, so it's a little thicker than the bobbin, which is either a 50 or a 60 weight. If I wind my own bobbins, it's fine, but this 40 weight would then be in the bobbin, and I feel like you can just see it a little bit thicker on the back. And personally, I kind of like the little thinner of a thread on the back. They're the same color. I don't have problem, I mean, pretty similar color. I don't have a problem with the differing weights. It's never been a problem for me, or I don't really consider it an issue. I just like the look of a little bit lighter thread, thinner thread on the back of a quilt. And that blended nicely. I mean, obviously this fabric is so busy, you're really having a hard time seeing color on there at all. But if you could see the color and could see the pantograph, this is the one that Janet asked for. This is called Paisley All Over. Just paisleys. So paisleys in all directions, you're echoing them. This is one that I did freehand a lot when I was doing free motion edge to edge. You can practice this one. If you're not doing digital work, no problem if you want to do this design. This one, get your marker board. This is my biggest suggestion if you're doing hand guided and want to practice a design before actually doing it on a quilt, is to get a large marker board, you know, like a 2x3, 3x4, something like that, a large marker board, and then get your dry erase markers. Hold your dry erase markers like this, like you would your handlebars on your machine, and then practice the same design over and over and over. You just practice doing that little bit of a paisley shape. Notice how when you do a paisley, it's not a teardrop because it's not the same on both sides, okay? A paisley, when you do that, when one side kind of goes out, but the other side kind of, one is convex and one is concave, you know, it kind of comes in just a little bit. So just practicing that design with your marker board, with your dry erase marker held like this, and just practice doing that shape. And notice how it's echoed, and then get around to the top here. So notice this paisley, it comes down. I'm not connecting it or anything. I just come down here, I echo that paisley, and then before even coming down over to this other side, I just echo it a third time, and that moves me down to another area. And these, if you're looking at this design, these paisleys were already in here. So you're just echoing, 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 echo, 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 coming around, doing a paisley here, echo that, then notice this isn't a paisley, this is just kind of a movement mark. And then you come up here, fill in this little space, and there, you know, if you were working down your quilt, then when you do it the next row, you would be fitting paisleys up into there. It doesn't have to stay like this straight line. This is very boxy, and the reason is the top of this is fitting into the bottom of this one. If you were doing it hand guided, leave some spaces here so that when you're doing your next row, you can fit some of those paisleys up into the negative space of there. You don't have to do these little stop points, little curves there. I would leave that part open, and then when I was doing a paisley the next row down, I would just fit it in there, you know, echo around that a little bit, make it look very uniform. But this is one that you can certainly do freehand. There's this one called Paisley All Over. There's another one called Slick that is very, very similar if you have that pantograph, but they're just paisley designs, all different directions. Echo it, move yourself around, and it's super doable. Super doable. Now I also wanted to mention on this quilt that Janet has wool batting in this one. I do carry Quilter's Dream wool batting. I really like the wool, the Quilter's Dream wool. I've used some other wools. And kind of what I like about this one is the uniformity in this one. I've used other wool brands where it's very splotchy. You'll have one section that's very thick, and then you'll have another section that's very thin. And what I like about the Quilter's Dream wool is it's very consistent across the entire, and it's got a nice loft to it. So let me tell you a little bit about, this is just a product folder, so it shows all of their product lines, all of their products in their batting lines. But it says Dream wool, scoured and superwashed for superior cleanness. So notice you're not getting any gunk in there. There's no pieces of anything. It's very clean, very consistent, excellent for hand or machine quilting. Finished quilt may be machine washed and dried, no shrinkage. Now another form that I have that tells me about all of their products, this one says as far as shrinkage, it says it has 0 to 1% shrinkage, so hardly any at all. It does say a cool wash and a cool dry. So totally machine washable, totally dryable, but do cool and for both of those. The reason for that is this is made with, it has no scrim or no resins, which is a great thing, but it is made, oh, that's on this sheet. It is made, it says the fiber content is high quality wool fibers, thermally bonded with fine, low melt poly. So by doing everything on cool, you keep all of those polyester fibers cool and not going to heat up and melt in any way. So a great option. I really, really like the Quilter's Dream Wool. I do carry it here in my studio. If you download my Longarm prep instructions, right now it is not listed on my intake form, but you can certainly write it in. It is just a tad bit higher cost than the others, which obviously wool is. But I am getting more and more requests for it. I have worked with wool more and more. I'm feeling more comfortable in doing it. So if wool is something I have some quilters that's all they want. Every quilt they want wool in there. And so I've told those, yes, I have it. And so now I'm just kind of telling everybody I do have wool, and I do have a whole roll of it at this point. And but try it out. And my suggestion in trying different batting brands, my best suggestion is to go buy a crib size of the different brands, whether it's wool, whether it's 80-20, whether it's cotton. Buy a crib size of several different brands, pull them out of the packages, and just compare them. See what you like. Some of them have very clean. Some of them have a little bit more of your natural fibers in there. Some are what I understand to be blown into a, I don't want to say a sheet, that's really not, but into the consistency. They blow the fibers in there, press them down, and that's why you get very splotchy areas. The Dream Wool, or the Quilter's Dream, all of their products, they are carded, cross-lapped, and thermally bonded for uniformity. Not all are thermally bonded, but they are all carded and cross-lapped from what I can tell. All of them except for, the Dream Wool is too, the Dream Puff is thermally bonded. The wool and the puff are the only two things in their line of products that are thermally bonded. Everything else is carded, cross-lapped, and needle punched. Now what that means is that it's not just blown in, so you've got splotchy areas. It's cross-lapped, so one this way, one that way. It's carded, so all of the fibers are going in the same direction prior to being the cross-lapped, from what I understand. And then needle punched for the cotton and the poly blends and all of those. They're needle punched down. The wool and the puff are thermally bonded, but I really like their products. And so I know some of you, you've used certain products for a long time, or maybe you're just not sure. That would be my biggest suggestion, is just go to buy different crib sizes and pull those out and really look at them, quilt with them if you want. But even looking at the consistency and just what they're made of, and can you hold it up and see through it, or can you hold it up and it's very uniform throughout. And obviously there are different price points, and that can make a big difference too. And I'm not saying that everything, by being blown in as compared to carded and cross-lapped, it's what you can afford, and I totally understand that. I can quilt with any of them. But if you have the money to spend and want to do a little bit deeper research and kind of see ones that are more uniform, that would be my suggestion, is to not always go with the cheapest, but really kind of compare. And you may find one that you really like too. Warm and Natural is a great option. Also, the thing to note, I think I mentioned this on a video several months ago, is in comparing battings, most of the products with Warm and Natural do have some sort of scrim in it. They only have a couple products that do not. Quilter's Dream is the opposite way. Most of their products do not have scrim. It's only a couple of their products that do. So just do your homework if that is important to you. But the wool batting is used in this one. Now, Where you get the very puffiness is the more open your pantograph is, you're going to get more puffiness in your quilt top. This one has this paisley all over pantograph on it. Did it fairly close together, so do you see where the paisleys are open in the center? You get a little bit more puffiness. The advantage of the wool is it's a natural fiber. It's supposed to keep you very warm, cool in the summer, warm in the winter, and it shows off that puffiness a little bit. It's got a little bit thicker of a loft to it, and it just stitches up very nicely. You can really see that paisley design here in the oranges. You kind of lose it in the flowers, which is okay. But there is that purple thread on top of that orange. Very fun. Very cute quilt. I know her granddaughter was super excited to get this back. So Janet will get it back to you as soon as I can. I have 3 quilts from Glenda, and this first one has a very heavy story. Sometimes quilting is that way, and there's been several times over the years that I've been doing long arm quilting that that I've had to do quilts like these, and they bring us reminders of not only how our craft can be healing, but also bring reminders of the difficulties that life bring as well. Glenda said this is a family friend, and these are all the T-shirts of a young man whose name was Adam, and Adam died at the age of 33 from drug addiction. And she asked that I share the story because we don't like to see this happen. And we just pray that if there are those of you watching today that are dealing with this very difficult thing, that you will understand we don't want to make quilts from your shirts. We want you to be wearing them. So we do ask that you seek help in any way that you can. Adam, she says that Adam, she did share his obituary, and she asked me to share this as well. She says Adam, in his obituary, it says Adam was a gifted and talented athlete all through his school years. In his work life, Adam had different jobs in the logging and construction industries operating equipment. In his last few years, he found himself doing painting and carpentry work, which he found he really enjoyed, and several of the T-shirts in this memory quilt are from those painting jobs. You can even see paint splatters still on them. His name listed on there, and the company name also. And he said he had a lot of skills. A lot of skills seemed to come easy to Adam without much effort. One thing he couldn't overcome was the terrible disease of addiction. And she says there is no sugarcoating the fact that Adam struggled with the terrible disease of addiction for a big part of his life. If only love could cure this horrible disease, Adam's family and friends would have cured him years ago. In reality, the sad fact is the cure is tough to find. Our hearts and prayers go out to everybody fighting this disease. And then it says, as your family and friends, Adam, we are thankful for the times you were able to battle this disease into periods of remission. These are the times your 2 girls will remember and cherish. We also would like to say if you were one of the many people in Adam's life that gave him a chance, or maybe 2 or even 3, thank you very, very much. Adam was a good son, brother, and father who could not overcome this disease, and sadly, we did not have all the tools to help him. So she did share also that one of his longest times in remission was after being in a faith-based rehabilitation center, and we're thankful for those. And so again, we just plead with you, if you are fighting an addiction, that you receive help. As loved ones and friends, we want that for you, and we want you to live your best life and take this to heart. So let me share a little bit about the quilt itself. And now Glenda said she created this quilt all from his T-shirts, and she used the inspiration. We don't have a specific pattern. She had the inspiration of a friend, Quilty Bee Quilt, and this was the inspiration photo that she sent me, What I want you to notice is the t-shirts themselves are then shadowed in the background by other fabric. In this picture, what I notice is that all of those fabrics are the same. Something I noticed in the quilting of this one that Glenda put together, let me pull this in a little bit. What appears to me so there's a lot of batiks, a lot of the sashing is done with batiks, and most of the t-shirts are then sashed with batik fabrics also. But I notice a couple in here. So here's one of the painting t-shirts. And notice the sashing in this one. This is not a batik fabric, but what it appears to me is some sort of other fun shirt of some sort that she has then used as the sashing around that one. There's another one, that same one is there. It's almost like it's a Hawaiian type of shirt. There's another one somewhere. Oh, here's one. This one has like bananas all over it, whether those are pajama pants or whether those are a pajama outfit. It feels more like a terry cloth type of, not terry cloth, more of a stretchy material. So I like, what I want to point out about this is that the t-shirts themselves are the main blocks, but if you have other fabrics that you could use as the sashing, maybe they don't work as a whole big block in your quilt. Some of those bolder, brighter prints are just fun fabrics that you could use the strips of those and do as the shadows behind those t-shirts. I think that is a really great option. Let me straighten this back out so I can show you a little bit more of the construction of it. So this t-shirt quilt is made with 20 blocks. There are 4 rows, there are 4 columns, 5 rows, so that is 20 t-shirts. The t-shirts are cut to 12.5 inches square, 12 inches square as you're seeing in the quilt, 12.5 when you're first cutting them. Now notice how this is the front of a t-shirt, and we're just using that, like there was a small emblem or a logo on the top like pocket area, and that's what this is. And there's several done like that. This is probably the back side of this t-shirt, so you can use both the front and the back. This doesn't have to be centered. This very much feels like the front of a t-shirt because it's in the top pocket area. Another idea of getting the right tools makes things much easier is to get a trim up ruler, like one of Lori Holt's trim up rulers, where it's not just your ruler. Let me show you this one. So this is not an ideal ruler for trimming up t-shirts, and I'm just going from my experience, is that when I would use a big ruler like this, or even my longer, like your 6-inch by 24-inch, what I would do is I would trim up one side of the quilt, and I would be trying to center the design, and I cut a little bit off one side of the t-shirt, a little bit off the other side, and I was trying to square it up, and it just wasn't quite working right. So a square ruler I feel is the best way to go. If you are doing consistent 12.5-inch blocks, I would buy a 12.5-inch ruler. My favorite ones are the Cute Cut rulers by Lori Holt. They are the exact size that you need, and it starts, you have that center point, and then it like radiates out. And so it has the 1/4 inch where you can see that around the outside edge of your ruler, so that you can make sure that what you are wanting in the design is in there, because you can see your 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around there. And it really helps to center the entire image on there. You know exactly where it's going to be, and then you can cut around all 4 sides of that, and you're not trimming up this side, trimming up that side. Those come in all different sizes. So if you're doing 8.5-inch blocks or 15.5-inch blocks, you buy the ruler that is specifically the size that you're going to use, and I think you're going to find it much, much easier. Can it be done without it? Yes, like most things, but a lot of times things are easier when you have the right tools, and that's one of those things that I just found. Having the size ruler that to the size that I wanted to cut the t-shirts really made it much easier for centering those designs that are on the t-shirts for then putting them into the quilt. If these are clothing behind here that you're doing, I would stabilize those as well, unless it's like a men's cotton shirt that is not going to stretch at all, like a dress shirt that may not stretch. But if it's any lighter weight fabric, anything at all, I really, really would encourage you to stabilize those first with one of those two stabilizers and then cut your piecing for that. So then Glenda also put around, so you've got the sashing and then your border, and those are all the same size, just a border around the outside edge. But you see how that creates that shadow? Like, look. All right, then on the backing, she did send me a minky, and I like this minky because it has a little bit of a mottled effect, almost like hand-dyed linen or something. And let me tell you this is 90-inch wide Watercress Mist is the name of this one, and I like it. This is the first time I really remember having a minky that felt mottled like this. So you've got lighter parts and darker parts. It just feels, and that's not just in, you know, if I rub it one way or the other, those lighter parts stay. So it's in the construction of it. Watercress Mist. I like that lighter green color. For the pantograph, Glenda said that I could choose what I wanted, and a lot of times with t-shirt quilts, I will do the diagonal plaid bias cut. I like that one. I also like this one. Abacus is just one of my favorite pantographs. I think this adds lots of great texture. This is what Abacus looks like. When you repeat this one, the top, you don't have to offset the rows at all. This is built into the design, so the top of this one, those match right there, so it's just straight repeat, and it just stitches back and forth, you know, one way and then the other way. It's super easy to stitch out also. This is the Omni medium gray thread is what I used. A lot of the fabrics, they're just darker prints, and I didn't want to do something too bright on them, so the medium gray blends very nicely. So that's Abacus on there. So thank you, Glenda, for making this memory quilt. And we do pray for Adam's family and his girls that are left behind. And again, pray for you if you are fighting an addiction as well. We pray that you will get help. Glenda's second quilt is called Positive Vibes. This is a pattern by Gigi's Thimble Quilt Patterns. I love this. This is so beautiful. It uses all, let me find it. It uses all Riley Blake confetti cottons, so those are all solid colors in the whole fabric line. So this uses a fat quarter bundle, if I remember right. The pattern does come in two different sizes. You can do a baby size that's 43 by 43. You can do a throw size that's 71 by 85, and that is what Glenda has used. And it does use fat quarters, and if you're wanting to make this size, that is 20 fat quarters. And using the solid lines are just beautiful. I really, really like this one. I've not spent much time to sit and figure out how it is put together. Obviously, the block, let me see, oh, here is the block. So one color, you know, you're combining two colors. So here it's the rust and the brown. Here it's the red and the green. So that is your block. The rectangle then has the triangle, I don't know exactly how those are done. I don't have the pattern, but I'm assuming it's, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming it's like easy corner triangles or something. You're stitching it to either side, pressing those back, stitching it to either side, pressing those back, and then squaring it up. Then you have the sashing in between those. And by squaring it up, then that's what makes it, it's so, for this block right here, it's diagonal when you stitch it, but then we put that block on point, and so now it looks like it is straight up and down, but in the piecing of the block, it is not. The sashing is 2 green squares and a white square. All 4 of those are that way. Then you put that square, and you've got sashing in between them all. It looks like railroad tracks running through there. It's just very, very cute. But it is set on point, so you are putting together your blocks in this fashion. That means at the sides you do have setting triangles, and in the corner setting triangles in the corner also. But very effective. Very beautiful. And you're just pairing two blocks together. I mean, it's just stunning to see what happens when you put all of those together, all the different colors. It's just absolutely beautiful. Here is the pattern front. So this could be done very scrappy also if you've got 20 fat quarters and you're wanting to do it very scrappy. And then obviously a background fabric. The background, this one says a good measure natural background fabric. If you're doing the 6 1/4 yards, you're making lots of small pieces to do around the, very fun. All right, and then a binding, they suggest a scrappy binding, at least on the pattern, that's what they show. If you're not doing that, then you need 2/3 yard of a binding fabric all the way around. She chose a white minky. Oh, just gorgeous. White minky. Very beautiful. Now the pantograph's going to show up nice on the front or the back. I really like it on the front. I mean, I really like it on the back too, but I really like it on the front. This is Modern Swirls. I love this. Oh my goodness, I love this. I love the texture of it. I love the contrast from all of the straight, the diagonal, the squares, and you know, all of those sharp points, and then adding in the spiral. It is just incredible. Love it, love it, love it. This nests up very tightly with each other. There's no overstitching from one row to the next row. I leave a little bit of space in there. Let me show you the printout. Because the printout does show having the second row actually touch the row above it. I don't do that. I leave a little bit of space there, and it really leaves a cohesive design. But this is, it's a tight one, but it is such a fun one to stitch out. It is just incredible. Just incredible. I love the texture it creates. I love the whole effect. Omni natural white thread. Just gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. I love it, Glenda. Glenda's third quilt is our 250th anniversary quilt for the anniversary of the birth of the United States of America. This is not a published pattern. This is only available inside of Quilt Circle. And last summer, one of our members, Elaine, came to me and she said, "Do you think we should do something for the 250th anniversary?" I had not even heard about it. And now it's like everywhere you turn. But back last summer when she first introduced it, I said, that'd be a great idea. Can you come up with some sort of pattern? And so Elaine sent me an idea, and I put that into EQ8 and tweaked the blocks and changed things and came up with this pattern. I did run this in Quilt Circle as a mystery, so from starting in October of last year through March, I want to say. I believe it was March, they received the finishing instructions. We ran it as a mystery, so each month they had to do a couple of different blocks, a couple of different types of blocks, and then several of those blocks. Now, Glenda has changed up my original design a little bit. I love it. I kind of did mine as a modified row quilt in that all of the friendship stars were in one row. All of the flags and all the houses were in one row. But then I did the stars, you might be able to see, the stars and the flags, I alternated those on the top and the bottom. I love it when members take a pattern and make it their own. And so Glenda rearranged things a little bit. She put some of the flying geese units that you can see on either side of the numbers. She made the houses so they kind of come up in a hill shape. Instead of doing all of the friendship stars in one long row, she nested those in with the other houses, added a star down here underneath this house. I love it, love it, love it. Put all the blue houses together with the red houses on either end. She just did a really, really great job. The other thing I like is that she did add borders around hers, and she did a skinny gray border. That was our background print, and then she did a red border around the outside edge. Very fun. And our backing fabric, this is a white tone on tone. Hard to see, but you can see the pantograph very nicely. This pantograph is also a new one to me. This is from My Creative Stitches also, and this is called Wish. And this one has the stars, and it has just some spirals in there, kind of connecting those stars. Very fun, patriotic design, so just really like this one. And this is what it looks like on the quilt top. You can really see it in the borders. Kind of lose it a little bit in the piecing of the quilt itself. But I did use Omni Natural White thread on this one for the quilting also. So you can see the 4 patches down across the bottom, the Ohio stars. That was a very fun quilt along, very fun. I hope you're doing something for the 250th just to mark it as a special anniversary, to celebrate it in a special way here in the United States. So just a very cute quilt, Glenda. I love that you made it your own. Love the numbers. This is probably the most challenging, were these 4-inch squares that had the numbers, but she did a great job with them, and appreciate so many of the members going along and doing this quilt along with us. And now we all have a 250th anniversary quilt to celebrate. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will be back next week with things that I've been working on in my own personal studio. I have been doing quite a bit, trying to make time for my own quilting, which is always a good thing. So I'll be back here next week sharing some of those. Until then, every quilt is worth finishing. We'll see you then.